And we're live. Hey.
Hello.
All right.
Hi.
Retro Brown Bag, October 18th. So what do? We get
Party.
together, we talk, and complain about Angular, apparently. I think that's what we do most days. And then talk shop, share tips, tricks, blog posts, latest news. Really, this is a water cooler talk for developers, for people who don't have a water cooler to talk around. And so we stream this live on YouTube. If anyone can present, and when you are presenting, just make sure you don't put anything that's trade secret, get you in trouble, like Amazon keys or the username password to your database, that type of stuff. You don't want to share that live. Um, yeah, so that's about covers it. So I think we left last time. I was sharing a little bit about some Docker stuff and some Durin or Durin. And we ran off a little bit long. So I think I'll pick up where that left off, right? And then we'll see how that goes from there. Let's see. Let's get screen sharing going.
I'm kind of sick today anyway, so.
Yeah, well, we're sick of you, George.
I did, however, I went to a Clojure workshop this last weekend. Eric at purelyfunctional.tv was running them. It was cool. I got to see a lot of neat Clojure script stuff on Trout Reagent, which I think is a really, really nice layer on top of React. I actually like it quite a bit.
Recently, do some Elm on here. I was kicking around the idea of us building up a little, like not a to-do project per se, but something like that, a domain that we can figure out, and we just start coding that solution in different frameworks and stuff, so that we can do some pros and cons for different ones and have them as examples. But of course, you know me, I like coding a lot more than I like talking.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't remember where I left off with Durin, but the idea here is that a lot of times with Rails, we would have these .env files, and okay, so I guess I'll explain a little bit, like .env and why we even have that. So one of the reasons Rails has had a lot of .env because 12-factor app is sort of a flag of mantra of things to do in terms of building great web apps. Especially in the Rails world, it's sort of the de facto, you point back to it and sort of saying, okay, this is what this recommends, and so that's how we're going to do it. And one of them is loading things into environment variables, so store config environment variables. So what that means is that the URLs for your database, username, password, anything for Redis, any keys you might need for talking to APIs and so forth, these are all put into .env files. These are anything that you do not want to share on the virtual brown bag, you put into .env file. So that's why he's like, JB, why don't you show one? Well, no, that's the point. Like, no, that's a section I do not want to share. And the reason why you put these in .env files and not in like some other file or something that you load from your source control is because we don't want that stuff in the source control. We want the idea that if anyone had access to full linear code, they would not have access to our ops stuff. Same thing for that. That's a big security hole, but you could have things where you could hire a contractor to come help fix some bugs, but you don't necessarily want them to have access to all your Amazon.
So wait, so where do these files live?
They live in your project folder, but like they don't get checked into source control.
Okay, but they are, so someone with access to the machine can still get them, right?
Right. That's sort of one of the counters of the .env. I was like, it's not that super secure because if someone did have access to the machine, they would get the access to that information. And that's, I'd say, yes, that can happen. I think it's one. I think the more to the point for this is, it isn't the solution; it is a solution, and one of the driving forces is the idea that your configuration should be checked into source control, because you should be able to open source your project at any moment and not worry about it. But yeah, I've seen pluses and minuses for using environment variables. So as you can imagine, so I did a lot of Rails stuff and grew my web skills up in that area. So I'm used to having .env files. And so a lot of times you can see projects out there that replicate that same functionality, but in different languages. So .env Node. So a lot of times I was using this project so that I could have a .env file and that I can then load it. And generally you would check to say, hey, load this in development, because generally in staging and production, a lot of times I was using Heroku, or God, I can't think of that service, platform as a service, with Node. It starts with an M, maybe. Crap. Never mind. There was another one. And I use it. And you can set environment variables very easily. So then generally I'd only use a .env file to load up when I was in development. And just sort of the show that, hey, it's in a bunch of other different common patterns or things you see. There's also one in Elixir, and it's definitely, this is very true. This is not the Elixir way. And and I can show how they handle it too, but it's sort of you can see there's a common pattern, and it might be something you've been exposed to or see because you're not coming from Rails where the heavy influence of a 12-factor app. So we're like carrying this bias or this preference elsewhere. So if we're wanting these .env files to be loaded and have these things set up, environment variables set up, we'd have to use these different libraries. And we only needed it for development. Because staging production, they're going to have the environment variables set up. So you have this complexity there. And so I wasn't very happy with it, and I always felt like I was abusing the system. That is where the traction of Derv comes in. Wait
a second. I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So the .env approach, so what happens? That seems at odds with the idea of, okay, a developer should be able to just clone the project and run it. So like, what do you do typically to enable that so that they don't have to go and then, clone it, figure out a ton of things to configure into a file that doesn't exist, and stuff like that? Like, what do you do to minimize that better?
A lot of times you have a .env example that shows at least the variables that you need to fill out. A lot of times you put in default ones because, again, it's a local environment. So it will even have my current job. We have a bootstrap process that you execute after you install, and part of the bootstrap process is it copies an example one into the files that aren't checked into source control. So that because while the database URL changed for staging production locally, it's probably going to be the default one and the default ports and stuff. And so that's how you do it.
So basically, there's a set of scripts to set you up for development? Yeah,
and then there's going to be some things where you just can't fill in. Because let's say you're talking to an API, like say FileStack.io or S3, then like you need to get that information. And with our Bootstrap thing, there's actually some other stuff too, because I'd say this is one of the heavier, more advanced DevOps companies I've worked with, and so they got some serious DevOps chops on some of the stuff. And so it can pull in some S3 keys and set you up in your .env file. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's not you exactly point out is like it's not a perfect solution, because I've seen many scenarios where it is you describe, you go in there and you're like, oh hey, look, I have I know I need environment variables, but I don't know exactly which ones I need, and I have no idea how to get this. Like, oh, I see that we're using Mixpanel. That's cool. What's the key I need? And then you have to go roaming around, and generally it involves talking to another dev, and then it's a secure form of communication. They copy and paste their .env file for you.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's something that's that is really not cool to do. But I guess if you can put together a script that'll generate all the right stuff for you and kind of give you the prompts, that's not that bad. Like, go talk to this person if you don't know the value.
Yeah. So let's do a little node project right here. And this is all ad lib, which is my favorite coding style because it guarantees that everything's going to break and be terrible. And so,
can you up your font?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Link.
What's GC?
It's I have a alias for git commit.
Okay.
Here, yeah, you're right. What's that? Alias? Let's do. Yeah, and
Isn't it? It's supposed to be git add -a now. Is the right way to do it?
Oh, really?
Not git add dot. You might actually even have an outdated version of Git because for a while it would actually give you a warning saying don't do.
How to see what version I have? Oh, dash version.
Yeah, you don't have an outdated version. It's really just, I've seen that. I have the latest version, and it lets me do git add a dot. So
Right,
it could very well be that my git is outdated. Well, it's 2.10 is the latest.
2.10, 2.10. Yeah, so your 5 version.
Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, am I missing a whole lot of awesome?
No, not really.
Well, Git dot does stuff relative to this directory, whereas
Okay.
-a does stuff relative to the root directory, and then other stuff as well. Because Git never does actually any one thing, despite what they say.
Yeah. All right, so I'll update Git today. I mean, last time I installed Git, it's got to be years ago, probably. All right, so we look at my Git status. So, it looks like it changes to commit. Is that staged? I guess it's staged.
Yes. Oh wait. Yeah. Staged.
Open up my handy dandy Visual Studio Code. Let's create a file, and we'll just call this. I don't know. We'll call it server.js, even though it's not really going to be a server. And what we'll do is say hi, and we'll then we'll have a super secret API key. How about that? I'm using. So with Node, what Node version do I even have these days? 4.47. Does that have any of ES6 stuff in it? I don't think so.
I don't know. Let's see, what version am I on? Yeah, you're pretty.
Yeah, you're way behind.
Yeah,
It's a long-term stable.
It's 6 or 7 now.
Yeah, it's a long-term stable. It's 4.4 something, right? Let's take a look at Node.
I don't know.
Oh, it's moved. Yeah, it was 4. Now it's 6.9. How's long-term higher version than current?
I don't know.
JavaScript.
I mean, like, I really
go home. You're drunk. Yeah, but 4.4 was, and so yeah, that's what I was working on. All right. let's get, there we go. So we can get environment variables from the process like this, right? And it should be secret API correctly. Super. So if we run node serve, currently that's undefined. All right, let's first show like the .env file, and so we should sort of see where from there. So we have a .env file. We can have super secret. Let's just set it directly. In my skills, not the best thing in the world, but I know we can do it by bash. Oh, and I think with Node, can't we just do say this super secret? I think with any command, right? API Node server. Ah, see, it looks like it. So we can set environment variables on the prefix. I think it's just a bash thing, right?
Pretty sure. You're not putting this in. You're actually just using an environment variable.
Yeah, it's just environment variable. So this one will just set an environment variable. And so you can also, if I say this, I think. Node server. So there we go. But that would only work for this current bash instance. So if I do node server, see here it's undefined. So if we wanted that, and you could also load this up in your bash profile and load up all these different environment variables. And I did that back in the day, and that became absolutely nuts when you had multiple projects you're working on, and it wasn't fun. Let's do a .env file. So it's a super secret API key. Okay. That, and now remember we had, I'll pull up here, we had a node project we can use. And then inside our server file, load it up. Oh, when do we run this? Oh, because of the did I mess that up? Is it because of did I exported it? Let's try here. There we go. So I guess the current bash setting is going to supersede the .env file. But okay, so now we can see that with this, I can then change this. And it's something that can be managed, for this particular app. So you can go to different folders and go to different apps, and your environment variables will change appropriately for that given application. But what kind of stinks about this is that now I have this other .env library and process that's kind of lame that I polluted my code base for really an ops sort of concern. And so that's where Derv comes in, because instead of doing .env file, they look at .envrc. So I'm going to keep this over in the other window so that I can look at it as I'm doing my stuff. But instead of a .env file, we could have .envrc inside here.
Wait, why is that better?
Because I see I do. If I jump in between here and say allow, why didn't it set the key? Let's give this a shot. See if it works. Normally it tells you what keys it added, so it makes me think that this is not working. Yeah. mess it up somehow.
Is there space, and that's the issue?
Yeah, I want to look and see. Maybe the format's a little bit different. That's what I'm looking to see. Maybe I have to say export on this one. Let me try this. Crap. All right, 1 second.
Yeah.
He says this as he loads up his other project with the right DERV setup. Should tell you which yeah, see, okay. You did exactly what I want. Now what does yours look like? Okay. Moving you over here. I'm blowing you up. And let's get back to sharing the screen. All right. That looks good. I don't know why it would matter that it's lowercase. There we go. It matters if it's lowercase. So now we see, and what happens there is, it happens where when I change into it, it loads it up and it says, hey, you're adding these environment variables. Now.
So DERV is something that runs at the bash level and basically
Yes.
overrides CD to add that behavior, right?
I don't know if it overrides CD as much as I guess it's monitoring the current directory. I guess is right. I wouldn't say I understand the inner workings of it,
Yeah.
but to me, the difference is one, like the .env file method involves updating and your code has to manage loading these files and so forth, and the other has bash and your environment doing it, and that feels better because it really isn't a code concern.
So the environment variables, where the hell are they loaded into? What if you had two versions of the same application and you seed into both of them in two different terminals? Are they going to be affecting each other, or is it just
no? Because remember, we saw that it's only for that given. So if, like, say, if we did this, we did.
So it's the environment of the parent.
The current bash instance. So we said super secret API key equals node server.
Right.
Versus here, obviously we still have that.
Okay. Right. So it's all right.
You're being attacked by a furry alien.
Yeah. So bad. I do not want to deal with it when I'm sick.
Yeah, so shared with that, and yeah, I like it a lot because also I know that the .env preference for loading environment variables is something that was on sort of my sort of influences from Rails and 12-factor app, and that when I was in Node and loading the .env stuff, it did feel dirty in terms of like I was forcing something that didn't really fit as well. And this is, I think, a better solution to solve that problem. And then Elixir solves it sort of differently, but you still use environment variables for some things, but you have different config files, so that just operates differently. In fact, let me see. I can probably show some of that stuff. Well, we'll see. Because I don't want to share my actual keys. That's the problem. Well, so how Elixir does it is they have config set up, and then they have secret files, and the secret files are what's loaded, and that aren't checking source control. So let me stop screen sharing and pull up a Phoenix app, and so that we can sort of see.
So what are you doing? Like, does your CI actually write those envrc files?
You just load environment variables. Your CI loads environment variables.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is, okay, so you do a deployment to a new instance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Does someone have to go in manually and set up all the stuff? Can you do a pure automated deploy to a new instance with this?
Right. Yeah. Because all the automated deploys involves you can set up environment variables, easy peasy.
Oh, okay, so the environment variables in that case are at the machine level.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really the DERV only solves the problem from a developer environment getting it set up, because staging production all work the same in terms of they have environment variables set up already for them. So it's sort of a step just to make it simpatico and the same and everything's good. I have a Phoenix project named George. That looks really appealing. Let's see, what is the George Phoenix project even look like? Oh, I think this is when we were looking at your forms or whatever.
Yeah.
More importantly, there is nothing here that I'd really get to worry about. Here we go. So we're going to share my Phoenix George project and show how they do their stuff. So for Phoenix, you have your config files, and this is where you sort of config your project and set up different values in terms of here is a very simple, because we're not really doing that much, but you can change the logging stuff. This is where you can configure things like connecting to different databases, Redis, say if you had a background job queue. These are all places you would do that. This is the config is for every environment, and then you have environment specific configurations. And so we can look at some other things, like for dev, it's obviously you're like, hey, I want you to debug the errors and I want you to reload the code and so forth. And it's static is a little bit different because they're live reloading. So you can see that this is where you set up the little flags and change things for when you're in development. And for development, you store your database information, because who cares? It's going to generally be like local hosts and support or whatever. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And then let's say we look at production. So production is going to be a little bit different, because now the port that you're going to be using isn't. So here, the port they set specifically to 4000. But in production, you're going to say, hey, pull this from the system. This tuple is basically an environment variable. Short of saying, hey, pull it from port, the port environment variable from the system. And then if you see inside here, you get to the bottom, you have this import config prod.secret. So prod.secret is a file that's going to be not checked into source control. So if we look at git ignore, we're going to have prod.secret is not in source control. And this is where we would store other important information. So here, this is a non-existent app. That's why I can show all these things. It doesn't matter. But then this is where you'd configure your database and put other secret information that production needs to build up, but not that you don't want checked in source control. So that's why that .env file suggestion for Elixir was like, hey, this is not really the Elixir way. Even though you do read system environment variables, it's sort of, you'd really do this more than the environment variables. But you do have scenarios where environment variables make sense. And I would say right now, and what we're doing for our Phoenix project, and generally the Phoenix projects I've worked on, mostly old Rails guys, we err more on the side of system environment variables, because that's what we're used to, and we don't use the secret as much as we probably could. I haven't really deployed a lot with, what's the EXRM, right? Or there's a deployment thing for Elixir. I think that's it. Let me pull it up. Right. So Elixir Release Manager, I haven't really done a lot with this. I know friends who have. Oh, hey, it's being replaced by Distillery. Because since Elixir's compiled, the idea is that you can compile this into a package that you then deploy, and that makes even more of the secrets make sense and easier to do, because those things are built into the compiled project, versus Rails, which is interpreted that you need to have that loaded as you're going. Yeah, so
I actually have been. I'm currently having a DevOps kind of issue where I have to store some OAuth keys for integrations for a project. It's like I really don't feel right about just storing them in plain text. Or in the case of actually one of the integrations, OAuth is not available, so it's just username and password. Ah, I really, really don't want to just store it just like that. But then how the heck to actually how to store it in an encrypted format? I don't know.
You like store it like in terms of source control or in the database?
Well, even in the database, even because yeah, I could encrypt it with AES, but where the heck am I putting the key then? Right.
Right.
So it's kind of like wherever I put the key, well, I could have just stored the integration password there to begin with, right?
You could put it in your LastPass. I put SSH keys and stuff in there.
No, but that's for you. I'm talking about this is like the application doesn't integrate.
I know, but I'm saying like you could store the key, and so you could have your key stored in LastPass, and then when you need to.
Right, but how does the application get it?
Oh yeah, I guess that's a good point.
Right, because then the application needs the LastPass password.
Yeah, it's true.
It needs to be stored somewhere.
Right.
Which is way worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been running. There's I know, I was told on Windows, there's some really low level cryptography functions that are tied to the system, which is at least something like that.
Doesn't Keychain do something like that? I don't know. I've never actually used the Keychain function, but
yeah, like operating system keychain functionalities.
Yeah, because you would want that's something I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, storing it in environment variables, that's one thing, but environment variables on Linux, there's just a file that you can read, and there's all your environment variables. In Windows, there's just a registry key you can read. On OS X, I assume there's something like that as well. So that's something I'm currently particularly struggling with, because I'm trying to figure out how the heck do I even do this.
Wow.
Figure that out.
Is that because you're giving that talk about security? You're like, I need to practice what I preach.
No. No, this is because that talk isn't about application security. That talk is about how hacking tends to work and what people are.
I hope the client knows how much effort you're exerting and keeping.
Well, it's a pretty straightforward thing. It just seems like there isn't a great answer for that.
Right.
I mean, yeah, there's the operating system built-in encryption or keyring stuff, but that's not, if that exists, which it doesn't necessarily. So yeah.
Huh. Well, what you could do is write a shell script that just does a kind of encryption.
Well,
right?
what do you mean? But encryption. So if you do AES or anything like that, it's a passphrase, right? You need a password to do the encryption over. So where are you going to store that passphrase?
I know. Well, you would have to, every time you started the project, you'd have to manually insert the new key that presumably was stored in your LastPass so you would log in to LastPass.
But it's
copy that over.
Right? It's an application that's running a web server. How does it get that?
Oh.
Yeah, that works fine. Well, it doesn't work fine, but that works when you're a developer. But how do you?
Right, but in production.
Yeah, that doesn't work. So yeah, I don't know. I was hoping y'all had some suggestions, but
No, I mean, like I said, I default by putting things in environment variables. If I can't, then if you're going to encrypt it, put in a database, you could if you use a salt code to encrypt it, then I'd put that in the environment variable, so there's no way they could decrypt it without having your super secret code.
Yeah, but where does the super secret code get to?
It gets it's an environment variable.
So
it's not saving. Like I say, it's it's my hammer. If I have super secret stuff that I don't want people to know, it goes in the environment variable. And I've seen plenty of blog posts to talk about the pros and cons, because there's cons, there's other ways of solving that problem, but it's sort of what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Is there a way to load up, like, other than CD? Like, can you load up, is there a dir command? Like, let's say you're somewhere else, and you want to load up that, or let's say you want to create a new project that's pre-existing, and you want to use a pre-existing environment variable thing you set up in dir. Can you, or, like...
You can put that in the bash, but no, like, you just copy and paste if you need to have that. If you're like, hey, I need to share these environment variables between projects, again, big bash stuff, it'd be like, you could probably symlink it.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't tried that out, but
that would actually make sense.
Yeah. So I was working on next year, as you're talking, it wasn't just as I was going to start working on Docker to get to load where this project was running in a Docker container. With that stuff. So that's why, as y'all were talking, that's why I was doing my stuff, getting things set up.
Cool. Yeah, I tried Docker for the first time a few days ago. It's pretty straightforward, but it actually it wasn't as simple as just installing MongoDB just on my local. I can totally see how it can. For whatever reason, these tutorials that I looked at way more complicated than the little bit that you just showed me.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's like most of these things are deep waters, and I think Node has this too, where there's an assumption that you're good at this stuff, and it's like, no, I'm not good at this stuff. Dumb it down, dial it down a bit.
Yeah, I want to know the 5 or 6 Docker commands that I will be using all of the time. And yeah, so it was like, and simply just set up this Docker Compose YAML file, and the tutorial was like, and copy all the stuff and don't ask too many questions. I was like, what? Like, really? So I got scared away, but I'm going to come back to it. Can't be worse than Vagrant.
Vagrant I never had a lot of fun with.
Yeah, not fun. Because you're waiting for provisioning. Often if you're like using Ansible, you're just like, oh my god.
Yeah. Docker does speed up a lot of stuff through using caching, from what I understand. It takes a while to do the first build, but then after you have that, it's pretty fast getting things set up. All right, so I'm looking to see. I know there's a way I can pull from a known image. And I thought of, like, generally you say from when you're in a Docker file. I say from here, do this stuff. And I'm looking and I don't see this. Let me see if I can pull up over here what this looks like. I guess it just says image, so maybe if I just pull from, maybe I have to pull the image down locally too. So I'm looking and I'm like, all right, so I want Node. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Node, and what was the versions we were looking at?
6 point something.
6 point something, something, something. So 6.8.1. That seems pretty good. So we should be able to say image, Node, and then tag it 6.8.1. And let's see what happens when we do this. Oh, hey, that looks pretty good. Execute with code 0. That's not good. Why did we not do anything?
Maybe it can't find that. Is that not the latest node? I don't know. On the Docker repo.
Yeah, it's saying pulling from server. It's pulled it down, and it looks like it did okay.
Oh yeah, it did pull it down.
So if we look here, do we get node? We got 6.3. That's here at the very top, 6.8.1. Okay. mean, it's not an ongoing process. Do I need to say anything to keep it going? Let's just look here. Let's read and see what they say.
Yeah.
So this will build the image, and then so this is using a Docker file. Docker Compose. We're having a bunch of different systems go through. Let's just actually here, since we're not talking database and we're just doing that. Let's just start with a Docker file, and we'll grow from there. And so let me move this guy out of the way actually, and we'll just go back here. So instead of Docker Compose, we'll do a Docker file, and this is where we can say from node, and here, so -t I believe is tag, and so we can say Docker build -tag, and we'll call this BVB app. And then we say this is the directory where we need to find the Docker file, which is locally. So we go there. So built successfully. Take our images now. BVB app. And then we'll use that command, which is run. I forgot what IT means. I have no.
Run it.
Oh, I guess run it makes sense. The name VVB app. And then I guess that's the name we call it. What's this name? And we'll just call this VVB app. RM, is that like a?
Yeah, that's a weird argument.
Yeah, we'll see what that means. It seems like I have a node REPL though, so. RM, remove one or more containers. I guess it removes it when it's done. So Docker run. And
oh, nice. Okay, so you're good. You've got it.
Yeah. But then here, let's take a look. So Docker PS, we can see that it is running. All right, let me say Docker PS. Okay, now it's not running. I don't know what the -s remove is.
So Docker Compose is really just like an easier way to do all the things you could normally do with Docker, with a Docker file.
Well,
right?
Docker file is going to be for one container. And Docker Compose is for multiple containers. We can use Docker file here because we only have one service.
So if you're running Node and Mongo, like both of those things together, you would need Docker Compose.
Correct. Yes.
Those things. Okay.
Because Docker anti-pattern is to put both those in the same container.
Gotcha.
From what I understand. Because Vagrant is, that's what to me, Vagrant is like you put them all into one little environment.
Right.
Yeah, so here each container is a separate service. And then you compose and build them all up. Now, what I want to do here is that we can then do, like, how would we get this going? A server started with this. Well, he seems super smart and awesome, but I don't know how to get that stuff. So we have ports, we have that. Let me see if I can get this going. So we'll say node Docker. I'm sure there's a guide here. There we go. We'll go with this. Node guys, they know what they're doing. The goals showed how you get a Node app and Docker container. That seems like a win. Let's follow this guy and we'll see where we get. First, create a directory where all the project files would live. In this directory, create the package JSON. Done. Nailed it. Then create a server file. Well, we don't need to do that quite yet, but let's just follow along. We might have to jump back. Long-term version is Argon. Interesting. We have a Docker file. Okay. Next, we create a directory to hold application code inside the image. This will be the working directory for your application. Okay. So this image comes with Node.js and npm already installed. So the next thing we need to do is install your app dependencies using npm. Okay. Makes sense. Bundle your app source code inside the Docker image. Use the copy instruction. Okie dokie. Seems like we could solve this by making a volume. So this seems like it's maybe an older way of doing things. And then we say expose 8080.
Would this be running npm install every single time the Docker starts?
Yeah, like I don't know that this is the best way of doing it. Like, because what you can do with volumes is link these things together, so like it would still be looking at your local node modules folder, even though it was in a Docker container. But I'm gonna follow what they do, and then we will.
I think this Docker file, this builds it once, right? And then you're supposed to use Docker Compose to actually do this stuff. Like from then on, you.
Well, yeah, this can build an image so that you could then have an image part of your compose. But
the thing, if you're doing mkdir, then it actually is creating a dir directory. It's actually copying stuff into there.
Well, it actually, and mkdir p means like if it, it won't create it if it exists already, and it will create like the whole thing. So it won't necessarily recreate the directory.
But yeah, the problem is if it doesn't recreate it, then like when you add new packages, like I'm not a big fan so far of what this thing is doing. But
it's going to be recreated the directory because when Docker starts, it's not going to have anything in it, right? Unless you specifically put it in there. Or am I wrong about that?
I thought that you build it and it's persistent. I guess I maybe don't have that. Yeah.
No, the persistent bits are, that's what's linked to there. Which means JB setting up environment variables every time.
All right. There we go.
Okay.
So, I don't like this structure. Like, I feel like we can do this with volumes and get it set up working better. But I'm going to Google here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't understand. If you're not actually installing everything every time, if you're linking the whole thing, then why do you need any of that?
Let's look at some of these. Basic Skeleton Express app. There we go. I'll just do this. We'll take a look at how they have their Docker Compose, and we can talk about it. See, that's the thing I would expect more is this. But they don't have... Here's their Docker file.
You're right. All Docker composers are running the Docker file. You were saying with caching, though, maybe it doesn't? I don't know.
Well, the problem was that, like, npm install isn't necessarily deterministic, too, right? That was part of the whole Yarn complaint. So if you're doing that, it's possible it's what's in your Docker VM is not what's in outside of it.
Huh. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm worried about, like, say if I install another project, like, can we think of something that's a simple install library that we can test against to see if it works? I guess we'll do like...
It would probably make sense to just not put that npm install in there and do it I don't know.
But then this other one had an npm install too, but they're installing...
That's true, but it's no daemon, that's all. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Although that still sucks because that means every single time it's still downloading it. But no, really? No, line 9. It's doing, what is that? Num run npm install.
Yeah.
So it's still doing it.
Yeah, but when you npm install and things are already installed, it's really fast.
I guess, okay, so I guess you do have to npm install because here's the thing, though. The Docker container might be in Linux. Your parent machine, might be Windows or OS X or something like that. Let's say any of that stuff is Node GIP.
Yeah.
So that stuff is not going to work inside of the Docker container. So you do have to npm install.
Gotcha.
So that's that's something that's an issue that I have working with Parallels all the time. I have to remember to type stuff into the correct console. but that's still, I don't know, that's still a problem.
Gotcha. Isn't there a way to run? Wait. When you hit Docker up though, you can go directly into that console. Like you can, it's like SSHing into a box.
Right.
So you can run. I mean, you just would have to remember to run it inside the container. I don't know what that command is, but it's probably no different than.
Yeah, like so. What's the problem is this thing? We have the nodes file basically ends. So let's have an ongoing process. So what do we want to do? Express. We have I'm looking up Express because I don't code Express every day. So getting started. I just want a hello world. There we go. So let's do npm install Express. And I'm just going to copy it. Hello.
Oh.
All right. So
It's just,
yeah, see, like it even. Let's adjust this and say
why did it close? It shouldn't.
it shouldn't close. That's my thing. Like I think you have to rebuild the image. Yeah, that's my thing. I don't like that. I don't have to rebuild an image to get something to work.
That's a pain in the ass for development.
Yeah. So I think you can do Docker compose. That's a lot of red. There we go.
Okay.
And now I'm going to open up Postman, and let's actually take a look over here. If we look at Docker PS, I can see that, hey, this image is started, and that has port 8080.
Yeah, just curl 80, localhost 8080.
I can't hit it. That's what I was worried about. So this is exposing. That's why here's a little bit different. So we were looking at 3000, and I'm only exposed that. So if we look here, they show the right way port. Yes, so we actually could say, hey,
which port?
It's exposing 3000, but then in our Docker Compose we say where.
We actually want to map it. That makes sense. I like that being more explicit because you're like, wait, which port am I referring to? It's like, okay.
So locally it'll be 3030. So here we can say Docker Compose. We'll tear down that guy for us. Back. It's over here. Up. And let's see. And just do this. Yep, there we go. Hello world. So if we look at Docker PS, we can see now it's saying, hey. Now see, notice this part's still there, even though we changed that because we haven't rebuilt the project. That's kind of weird. And I guess you see where I don't have to rebuild my stuff all the time. But that could be because I run the stuff in, so I don't do npm install here. So what I would do is, yeah, but that's your pack. Let's see what happens here. Let's add. We do Docker, so we can do Docker exec. And we pick the image, I think is what we do next. So this, and then we say back. Crap. Maybe take ready, Docker. Did I do that right? Doesn't look like I'm doing it right. Docker bash. Let's see what it does. Pulling it over here. So container and then command. I guess I need the .it. There we go. And now I'm inside the container. See that stuff there. Now if I exit, I can do it in this container, npm install Lodash. Yeah, see, it didn't. I expected it to. Let's see what happened. Let's see what. Come on. How do you not have like? How am I supposed to see it? Okay. Isn't there something to like display? Is it cat? Will just display the contents of a file.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, so Lodash is installed here, but it isn't like linked back here.
Really? What if you reload the file?
Like
That's weird. So there's not a mount? Wait, so you have to. That's.
Yeah, it's probably I need to configure it right because like there's a way to get them to link back and forth.
That seems like a kind of a deal breaker if you have to reload the file every single time. Well, you're only. It applies for all file changes or just just all file changes, correct?
Yeah. So let's try this. Let's decompose. Let's compose
So
down.
if you just create a file, like touch, blah blah.
Okay, and we want to see if it's in that package. So touch. All right. Now Docker ps. He doesn't have the hello file in there. There's a way to do it though. I know there is, and I've done it. Mm-hmm. but it's sort of seeing how they connect the two, that we can at least get that stuff inside there. My guess here too is that if I do npm install Lodash locally here, and then I do npm install up here, like it doesn't know about that. Because if I do cat package, yeah, that's after based on what we have been hacking. That's no surprise, but I think there's a way to make it where it does. So we're getting closer and closer.
Well, what about the path? The path is user/src/app. Okay, so
that's what we set that up. Yeah, so we set the working directory to that.
Okay. And so that is supposed to be a map to your project.
Right, based on the compose, it's saying, hey, these are the volumes to map between them.
And it should. I've had this in Vagrant before.
We said source? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's what's going on. Remember, we sort of copied two different things. Yeah, so they did user source, and they just did source. So let's try that out and see if we get rid of that. Let's use this guy's thing. So what does he has? Make directory source. He runs that, but we don't care about that. He wants to make the working directory source. Add. So that's a little bit different than copy. But add these together. Let's keep on going through here. And maybe that links the stuff. And then we run npm install.
Which I don't totally get why it's an array. Like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, see, yeah. See, he didn't need that. See, that's what I think the other one was an old thing. Oh, so he has Node. Even we didn't really use that. All right, so let's try this. So Docker compose down. Compose build. Package. Oh, because they have app, and we don't care about app. Good times. All right, Docker compose. Like that. Failed to execute start script. Do I need an npm run start? No, it's just npm start. Anyway, we're getting close, but we're also over time. So we can pick up where we left off like we did last week and getting a completely Dockerized node existence that can link together. I think we're getting close. I think the secret is that add, the copying thing that I think this is the magic sauce that will have the two link together so that we don't have to like rebuild all the time. But we'll find out. Stay tuned next week. All right, guys. Fun. It's great chatting, learning about all the Dockerized DevOps stuff. And George, you need to get better.
Yeah. We can talk about ClojureScript a little bit next time. I've got some stuff I can show about.
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Cool.
All right, guys. Later.
Okay, see you.